I had over-prepared, actually, honestly. I'm going to have to split the sermon into two. Couldn't do it in one. There has to be, so I asked if you guys had seen The Lion King 1.5. Did you see that yet? No. All right. How many of you have seen Lion King 1.5? No. Well, I love it because they made Lion King, and then they made 1.5, which really isn't after, it's before the beginning. It's like, so this today is before the beginning. We got to go back before we can actually go forward. So then I thought, well, shoot, I should have just left it as joy today, because that's kind of what we're going to look at. We're going to look at Zachariah and Elizabeth, John the Baptist's parents today. But next week is going to be so exciting because we're going to go before the beginning. I guess that'll be the 1.5. And we're going to look at all the things that God put into motion up to the point of Zechariah going into that temple. Have you ever heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls? You may not have. Some of you have. Well, they have unearthed even more, and they have translated more of the Dead Sea Scrolls. They've learned more about the Essenes. We talk about the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Well, there was a third group called the Essenes. And they're learning more and more and more about this group of people and how it connects to John the Baptist. How everything God had been putting into motion and laying the pieces down for the arrival of his messenger, who is proclaiming what? That Jesus was coming. The Messiah was coming. So today we're going to look at the part that we just read from with Zechariah. Next week we'll get into the prepared before the prepared. So then I was like, well, then I don't have a title for today. So I thought the best title would be Best Laid Plans, right? Because what happens with best laid plans? They change. They never go the way that we think. And that's kind of where we're at with Zechariah today. So do you remember I don't know if you were up here or not, the sermon that I did on the tabernacle? You got to see the Holy of Holies and the Ark of the Covenant and everything that was inside that area. And then we talked about the laws, and rules. Well, today we're going to talk about all that again. So this goes all the way back. I know, there's going to go, oh, rules. We don't like rules, do we? And that's exactly what the Israelites were doing. See, the Pharisees, which you might not know, was those 631 rules that they made the people follow. They weren't even supposed to follow. It didn't even apply to them. We're going to go back in time just a little bit. There's a priest by the name of Melchizedek. How many people here ever heard the name Melchizedek? He is the priest that, well, let me ask you this. How many people have ever heard that we're supposed to give 10% of our offering? Okay, that came from well, not Melchizedek, but it was Abraham. Melchizedek is a priest who showed up to Abraham and he blessed him. Now, there's a lot of speculation here because Melchizedek doesn't make much sense. He just appears kind of out of nowhere. And he's a priest, and he's a king, and he's a prophet, and he's like all three in one. And he comes to Abraham, and he blesses him. Now, Abraham also didn't have a kid, and Sarah was also old. And so Abraham is so happy about this blessing that he says he's going to give Melchizedek a tenth of everything he owns. That's where we get the whole 10th bit that we give in offering. Now, why is that important? Because that was the last time that you could have a priest, a king, and a prophet all in one. After that, Jacob comes on the scene. It's Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. And Jacob has how many sons? 12. Where do the kings come from? The Judah line. Where do the priests come from? The Levi tribe. And then the prophets are of the third. God separated them, and not one person could have control of all of that until the Messiah. And who's the Messiah? Jesus. There's another little obscured story that you may know, that you may have questioned through the years. Remember when King Saul gets ready to go into battle. King Saul's the first king of Israel. And he's waiting on Samuel the priest to do this offering. And he's getting really itchy. Do you get itchy? Yeah. He's getting really itchy because Samuel's not showing up. And he wants to know. He wants to get this offering. He wants an answer from God. And so he decides that he's not going to wait on Samuel. And he goes ahead and he does the offering. Huge no-no. And Samuel comes and he's so upset. And God tells him that at that point the kingship is removed from him. Nobody in his lineage will ever be king again. That may seem like, wow, that's pretty harsh just for not waiting on Samuel. Well, it was a bigger thing. Because he was a king. And what did he just do? The acts of the priest. Those two could not go together. That's what God was mad about. Because by doing that, he was signaling that he was the Messiah. And that was not supposed to happen until Jesus. That's why that was such a big deal. It's like when I heard that, it's like, oh wow, that answers so many things. So now we're going to fast forward. So that had always been separated. So the Levites, they were the priests. And they were the ones that had all the special rules because they were set apart by God, because they were the holy ones. Well, guess what the Pharisees did? They took all those rules that applied to the Levites and they applied them to everybody. That was a big burden. That was stuff that didn't even apply to them. That would be like telling you that you have to live by all the Florida rules while you live in Nebraska. It wouldn't make any sense, would it? You don't live in Florida. Well, that's kind of what was going on. They had to do all these rules that didn't apply to them. Well, that's where we get the three different sects. We get the Pharisees, we get the Sadducees, we get the Essenes. We're going to look into that more next week. But Zechariah is a priest, and he's from that Levi tribe. His wife Elizabeth is also from that Levi tribe, so they both come as what? Priests. Which means they can only do one thing. That's the priestly duties. Well, Zechariah is now old, and they each had divisions. And when their division came up, they cast lots. Have you ever, gambled? Have you ever done the lottery, played dice? It's kind of what this was, though. They cast lots to see who would get to go into the temple. And you could go your whole life and never get that opportunity. And here, Zechariah is old. He's never gotten to go. And all of a sudden now, of all the times, his number's called. And he gets to go. This is a big, big thing. You are now going into the Holy of Holies. You are now going before the Ark of the Covenant. And we looked at the table of showbread and the table of incense. You remember all that? When we had the pictures up there? That's where he's going to go. But it was dark. It was not lit up, and so he had to know, he'd been trained from little on, that when you go in, behind the curtain, you had to take like 6 steps forward, and then you had to turn, and you had to take another 4 steps here, and then turn, and 2 steps, and you were in front of the Ark of Covenant. And that's when you lifted up the prayers. So that's what Zechariah does. Now, can you imagine Elizabeth being outside? She's now old. Her husband has just been elevated to one of the coolest things that can ever happen. And so she's out there, and she's praying, and she's so excited too. And he goes in to do his priestly duties. Now, do you also remember from that Sermon on the Tabernacle, what were the 2 things that a priest could not do when he went into the Holy of Holies? He could not complain. And he could not pray for himself. Not in the Holy of Holies. That was only to worship God and to lift the prayers of everyone. We're going to see that this comes into play. Zechariah goes in there. And it says, well, he's standing there and he's lifting up the prayers. Who shows up? An angel. Now, they don't look like our fun little sweet angels that we see around in the churches. These guys are mighty. They are big. They are like probably 16 feet tall. They're huge they're fierce looking. That's why everywhere in the Bible it says, do not be afraid. It says they were terrified. Well, can you imagine being in the dark and all of a sudden an angel just pops up in front of you? Would you be like scared? Yeah, I'd be scared. It says he was terrified. It's a wonder he didn't have a heart attack at the moment. He was old. But Gabriel talks to him, and what does he say? This is the key. He says, your prayers have been heard. Now, what were the prayers that he were lifting up? Was it his prayers? No. They were the prayers of the people. When do you think that maybe Zechariah quit praying for a baby? A long time ago. Elizabeth's probably 80 years old. Zechariah was, or maybe 70. He was almost 90. Yeah, I don't think he was praying. Probably by then, he was probably praying the opposite. Can't handle a kid at this age. So that means that God heard his prayers way back when he was a younger man, that he was praying for a son. See, for God, he knows no time. There's God's timeline, and then there's our timeline. He'd been praying for something for so long, and it never happened, that I am sure he'd probably just given up asking for that very thing. And now there's an angel, and he's standing right there, and he tells him at that exact moment, when he was completely by himself in the dark, in the Holy of Holies, that God has heard you. How big is that? And then he says he's going to give you a son. What do you think Zechariah's response was? My wife's old. No, he was very nice. He didn't say the word old, but that's translated. Way past her prime. How's she going to have a kid? Yeah. And Gabriel, he says, how do I know this is going to happen? And Gabriel says, because you did not believe me. Now that may seem really, really harsh. I mean, he's old. His wife's old. This is a shock. There was no preparing on that. But I think it was more for a sign. Because God wanted everybody to know that not only was this going to be a miracle and a special occasion, but they wanted them to prepare. Anything that's a big event, what do? You prepare. That means you prepare for your birthday too, don't you? Yeah. I'll get presents, you get a cake. They don't just all of a sudden decide, oh, it's your birthday. Happy birthday. That would be my kids. But not when you're kids. So they're preparing. So Gabriel says, because you didn't believe, you're not going to be able to talk. You're going to be mute. Wow. This is until these things come to pass. That is a key verse that just hit me this time that I haven't even thought about all these times I've read it. Didn't even think about it at the first service. What things? So that's why he was a man and not a woman, because once she got pregnant, I would have been going, okay, it was fulfilled, not going to talk. No, it doesn't happen. He's still mute. So he comes out and they're wondering, what's going on? He's taken so long. It doesn't take that long to offer up prayers. And when he comes out, he's been changed. He was in the presence of God. And now he can't talk. And he's just making signs and wanting to write stuff down. Can you imagine what Elizabeth thought? When he told her what he had just found out. And he says, then they go home. And guess what? She gets pregnant. But did she go out telling everyone about it? No, what did she do? She hid. She hid for 5 months. Now one could say, well, it could be because, well, if it's too good to be true mentality, she was worried. She didn't want to get her hopes up. Or it could be because of God's timing again, the preparation. He didn't want anyone to know yet. It was all in timing. Because who is going to be the first one that's really going to see her pretty much after word gets spread out? Her cousin Mary. Mary's going to be pregnant with Jesus. Elizabeth's pregnant with John the Baptist. It's all in timing. Now, there's another little peculiar thing. Did you see what he said? You will call him. They already had the name picked out for John. He said, you call him John. You know why that's a big thing? What was his dad's name? Zacharias. So what would John's name be called? Zacharias. We're going to see later when we read the scriptures that they say, John? There's nobody in the family named John. But God set him apart. Totally set him apart. In fact, he said what? You can't drink strong drink. He wasn't supposed to have alcohol. There was a reason for that. He was going to be Nazarite at birth, which means set apart. So not only was he a Levite, not only was he a priest from both mommy and daddy, but now he was being set apart of even the priests. And there's one key thing that I hope you catch. It said he will be filled with the Holy Spirit from where? From birth, inside his mother's womb. Before he was ever even born, the Holy Spirit was there. And next week we're going to see that too. Because when Mary shows up, something happens. Something exciting. Well, next week, we're going to get into some super, super exciting things in the preparation. Those 400 years that they call the silent years or the missing years. No. God was not silent. They're missing, but they're missing because the Pharisees wanted them to be removed, redacted. They didn't want the Jews to know what was going on. That's what we're going to get into next week. And we're going to get into why God was laying all of the pieces down in preparation for John, who was preparing for Jesus. It's going to be exciting. So, what I'm going to leave with you today is best laid plans. Our best laid plans very rarely ever materialize, do they? If they do, it's called what? A red letter day where you're going to circle it on the calendar? I'm a planner. That's why I always have to have plan A, because it never goes plan A, B, C, D. If you ever talk to me, they go, how's it going? Plan G. I'm already way down the line. But I had to have a plan to begin with so I can move down the line. Yeah, that's not a control freak. You just got to have a second idea, right? A second plan. But what happens when those plans don't go the way we thought? God hasn't left us. It's all in His timing. And as we looked, I found out that the verse He's always giving me that I didn't even know was in the Bible is in Habakkuk. Wait for it. Wait for it. Wait for it. Even if you have to wait 60 years, 80 years, I'm so glad I don't have to worry about being a mom at 80. Just saying. But God answers prayers in His timing and in His way, and He prepares the way.